Good afternoon, everybody. I hope people aren't feeling entirely sleepy after a nice Mexican lunch. My name is Emrys Schoemaker. I'm the lead for policy and advisory at a firm called Caribou Digital. We do a lot of research and policy support around digital governance with international organizations, governments, and other partners. It's a real pleasure to be here today. I think, firstly, to acknowledge what a lift it's been for to bring this together. For the Swiss government, thank you, and for Daniel at the Open Wallet Foundation for pulling this together. It's, I think, a critical space now for the sector. So I'm hugely privileged to be here and to share the stage with two colleagues from the International Federation of the Red Cross and the International Organization of Migration. Before I turn to them, I'd like to just say a few words about the role of digitalization, digital credentials, wallets in the humanitarian sector before diving deep into the use cases and specific details that my panelists are going to share. We've been doing a lot of research and a lot of policy support in the humanitarian sector particularly. And most recently, this work, supported by the Bosch Foundation, has really flagged up some core challenges that, to me, speak to many of the challenges that I think many of us in the room are familiar with. And so I'd like to share them with you because I think that will prompt insight, thoughts, and feedback for this community. Many of those challenges around registration, around service delivery, transitioning people who are receiving services from one service to another are common to many of the work that people in this room do. And yet there's severe challenges, distinct challenges that the humanitarian sector face. And I'd like to illustrate three of them first. Firstly, in the humanitarian sector, there is very high levels of siloing. So systems that work in one sector, health sector, maybe food support, maybe education support, and those systems are very often disconnected entirely from each other. And there's varying capacity within those sectors and within those silos, as well as a persistent push to reduce the duplication of those systems and reduce the duplication of data, for reasons that my panelists will talk to in more detail. And although there's a push to reduce that siloing, to bring a more integrated approach, to have more interoperability, et cetera, there's also structural reasons why that doesn't always happen. Actors have very good reasons to protect the data that they collect for mandate reasons. They collect it for a particular purpose. New consent might be required for a change of use and a change of purpose. But there's also a competitive advantage. Holding data means that when you're competing in a competitive funding environment, you can promise to deliver services quicker and then win contracts. A second challenge that I think the sector faces that's really relevant for the conversations here is there is a very important policy commitment to transitioning support from humanitarian organizations to development organizations who may be there for the long term, to organizations who may be host states or other organizations who have a much longer term presence. And again, Emanuela from the IFRC will talk to that. But this transition from humanitarian services to development services, such as social protection, has huge implications for digitalization. And understanding how those technologies support that process is something that needs further thought, further support, and particularly new technologies that can enable that to happen smoothly, efficiently, and most of all, importantly of all, safely. So the third challenge that the humanitarian sector really is challenged by is working in context where digital maturity is often very low. People don't have access to digital connectivity, to smart devices, to the kind of tools that we use every day and assume many of our services will run on. So thinking about those access requirements is a really important challenge for the sector. All of these challenges are accentuated by the fact that there is a funding crisis, and there is a huge challenge now as organizations struggle with massively reduced amounts of funding to support life-saving services. So thinking about how to resolve and move beyond that, I think, is something that we'll touch on. And the funding crises, the calls for UN reform, the calls for reform of the humanitarian sector all lead to questions around how can we help organizations to work better together, to share services together, to share data more efficiently and more effectively. And so with the context of those challenges and the context of this sector, I'm going to turn to my two panelists, and first to Emanuele from IFRC. Over to you.
Thank you for that introduction. So I'm Emmanuel. I'm the manager of the digital unit, essentially looking at digital products and how we use them in our operations at the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. So we bring together 191 national societies that have various types of activities within their own national context, ranging from disaster response, disaster preparedness, health, and community services as well. So, realizing that maybe this is a bit of a new concept, I'm going to start with maybe putting things into perspective and tell you a story about something that puts together a scenario that people actually go through. And so this is the story of Amelia. Amelia lives by a river in a small community, and every couple years the river floods, but to varying degrees. This year is particularly difficult, and the flood waters rise very quickly. Amelia flees her house, but she doesn't have time to secure it. She doesn't have time to make sure that some things aren't destroyed through the flood. And she grabs the clothes on her back, her cell phone, and whatever she can find quickly. She doesn't grab all of her documents, and she heads to her family member's house for shelter. Her family members are also impacted, and they can't house her for very long. So she sets off and starts looking for services. And she's completely unaware of where she can get shelter, cash, and basic needs assistance. She starts looking online, and it's not very clear. The local news outlets aren't saying much. The social media isn't saying much, but eventually someone tells her about a Red Cross branch that's offering shelter. So she heads over there. And she sits down at the registration desk, and she provides her information, basic information, name, address, phone number. And they ask her for a piece of ID, and she realizes she doesn't have her piece of ID. Luckily, there's someone at the shelter that she knows that can vouch for her, and she's okay. She gets shelter, she gets a little bit of money for her basic needs, until 2 days later, where the shelter runs out of supplies, and she's asked to move again. And so they tell her about another shelter offering similar types of assistance, and she knows that one of her family members is staying there, so she decides to head on up over there. Once she gets there, she has to re-register because the systems don't connect. The people in front of her don't know about all the information that she already provided. And then I'm not going to go on and on and on because the story could go on, right? There's different things that could make it happen so that she has to maybe even cross borders at some point and go to another Red Cross or Red Crescent branch, and they don't know who she is because we don't have that interoperability between our systems. We don't have necessarily a digital ID that can help facilitate that as well. So the reason I'm saying that is we can start imagining a world where we actively start thinking of interoperability between our different systems, between even our different humanitarian organizations, but even within our network of national societies. So we have 191 national societies. We operate in 191 countries, and oftentimes people do have to leave. And even within our own, I worked at a national society before. I worked at the Canadian Red Cross, and sometimes even between branches, we have difficulty using common systems. However, many national societies, and including the IFRC, are actively working towards exploring and fixing that. And this is what brings us to digital IDs and digital wallets for today. And so I mentioned I'm part of the Digital Transformation Department, and what we aim to do is to enhance how we provide humanitarian assistance to those in need. What we have done in recent years, we are exploring the use of digital identification to people who have no official or no legal IDs. In contexts like I explained, but like my colleague will explain a little bit further as well. And our ambition with these digital IDs is so that people can access the care or the assistance or the services that they need through a trusted digital ID. We hope that the digital ID that we will have will be self-sovereign, will have a sustainable business model, will be a collaborative, underlying collaborative governance model for it, as well as have wide acceptability in humanitarian and development organizations. How we've done that over the last few years has been, we've participated in the Digid Consortium, which is, the membership is IFRC, Norwegian Red Cross, Norwegian Refugee Council, Save the Children Norway, and it was supported by Innovation Norway. So from 2019 to 2023, we piloted a functional ID and a wallet in Kenya and Uganda. People were able to identify with this ID and receive multiple types of services, like health services, as well as cash assistance for displaced people. So, the next phase of that, from 23 to 24, we continued our work funded by ECHO to enable dignified humanitarian assistance through safe and secure sharing between organizations. So what we were looking at is, can we do deduplication to make sure that people are getting the right services or the right assistance, and also do referrals between us, between agencies. So we tested that from 23 to 24. And an ongoing initiative is the Integrated Assistance Initiative, where we're looking at a collection of digital solutions that can be interoperable. This ranges from, being able to provide cash to people in need, to register people, to have a communication layer for when we need to ramp up quick call centers. So it's a collection of digital solutions that can work together to provide a more holistic assistance to people. But the one product that I want to talk about is AccessRC, because AccessRC is basically a mobile app that allows people to self-register if they're seeking assistance. So national societies, national societies can list the programs that are available in that area geographically, and then people can, wherever they are, whatever their needs are, they can register and they can follow. This also helps us automate the validation of people's identification, because it's all done through the platform in a secure way. So just the last thing on that, I think what we want to do is invite organizations to partner to reinforce and advance our collaboration on interoperable and functional digital IDs. I think we'll have some follow-up questions later, so I can elaborate a little bit more on some of what I just said. Over to you.
Thanks, Emmanuel. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nelson. I work for the International Organization for Migration. We'd like to think that we deal with international migration in an organized manner, so that's what I've tried to explain why we're trying to do so. The digital identity is something that is coming quite lately in the picture. What I mean quite lately is we could have been doing this for quite a long time. There was the technical specification, the technical expertise was there, but probably none of us was so focused, or we were focused in any other business, that the digital identity came a bit late. And on top of this, there is kind of a misconception between digital identity and digital travel credentials. Two completely different things. Despite the fact that the digital travel credentials, of course, the digital identity, of course, can be used if there is an agreement between states. I get that later. To somebody move from A to B. So the most important point for us in terms of migrants is the registration of regular migrants. So irregular migrants are the ones that live in the country, and they have a huge impact on the economy. Why? Well, they don't pay taxes, and all the business that could have developed any interesting ideas on any area are not being done. Why? Because they cannot do so without an identity. And this goes for a legal identity, normal legal identity, and also sometimes digital identity, which is a consequence of the legal identity, of course. So this is an important point. We work with the member states within the scope of either SDGs and global compatible migration to make sure that regular migration or migrants can move regularly, and global mobility is in fact something that we work very closely with our member states. Why? Well, because having access to legal identity, in this case, digital identity, will have access to services, to education, to open a bank account, for example. I get to that later as well. And for example, cash-based initiatives where people can receive money to set up some small business is also important. And this comes normally with a digital identity as well. There's a lot of examples in Africa, for example, where this has been implemented with excellent results. This is also a very important step, and a lot of member states, especially in Africa and South America and some countries in some parts of Asia, they understood the importance of having legal digital identity. So, for example, back in the Industrial Revolution, UK set up a train because they need a train to put the goods at the border, shipping up on the boats and selling to another places, right? The other countries in the continental, they did exactly the opposite. They put up the train to boost the industry, right? So it's a bit more like this with the digital identity. Yeah, there are countries that, as a consequence of their own development, they have the digital identity as a granted. It's not a luxury. It's something you use on a daily basis. Those developing countries would like to, let's say, increase the trade, especially at the land borders, right? They try to use the digital identity to speed up the process of trade and development, of course, by facilitating the movement. This is also impactful on the most vulnerable. It's important to understand that once a vulnerable person, being, for example, a single mother with 2 kids, or being an illegal migrant or a regular migrant, the one depends on your perspective, gets an identity, then they can, in fact, produce more and get involved in the society, not only at a social level, can vote or can have access to services and so on, but also can be at the business side. So this is one of the important that, in fact, creates inclusion, right? And for example, let's see, if somebody is in a camp, they have access to medicines, for example, or even cash, or any other non-food items, for example. The identity is important, and digital identity is one of the aspects that we normally use to improve that part. Now, on the negative side, I would say, I don't want to say negative, on the less positive side, is the point of the recognition. So a country issues a digital identity, which might be recognized internally, not everywhere. For example, some cases in banks or in social services, they don't accept or they don't recognize the documents issued, the digital credential, let's say, of the person. Okay. And then is external. So the external means that, for example, if somebody is stranded in a country, from country A is stranded in country B, and country A doesn't have an embassy on the country B, that person is a regular migrant without documents, undocumented, and they want to go back home, but there's no way to do it. Why? Because the embassy is not there, nobody can issue a document. So if there is an agreement between country A, country B, and of course the airlines to travel, to bring that person to the other side, so a travel credential can be issued for that specific occasion. So when people arrive on the other side, they have 1 month or 2 month validity, so they can ask for passports and ID cards and so on, and get along with it, with this or life. So this is a very important point that we, as well. And of course, interoperability is a key issue. Sometimes we have different databases in one country. They not communicate with each other. The information is not in a digital format. You can have access to that information if you're not in the capital. Sometimes legal framework is also an obstacle. Why? Well, for example, if you are from a certain part of the country and you have to run away from that part for any reason, political, religious, whatever, you are now on the other side of the country, the legal framework is obliged you to go back to the place where you run from to get a birth certificate, to get an identity card. So that person is undocumented within his own country. So there's a lot of challenges, not only in interoperability, not only in technical parts, but also on the legal framework. And data protection is one key, of course. And let me just say, this is the last, I swear, is the cybersecurity. Thanks very much.
So I just want to finish by making the point that the humanitarian sector is driven by very high levels of technical challenges in terms of operating context, in terms of institutional requirements, and also hugely challenging questions of governance. I know that the expertise in this room loves a challenge. loves a solution. So I'd welcome you all to our session tomorrow where we'll have IFRC, UNHCR, World Food Programme and IOM coming together to really think about how to make this work together. And we'd welcome your expertise and support for that process. The need has never been greater. Please join us tomorrow. Thank you.